Newsflash, the dismissive avoidant is not the only emotionally unavailable insecure attachment style. Actually, all three of the insecure attachment styles are emotionally unavailable. Leslie Wells, connection coach here. I help individuals grow, heal, thrive, transform their relationships by changing the relationship with themselves by learning their own attachment style, their wounds, their core triggers, how to heal, and understand the attachment style of their partner. So let's get into it. It's obvious that the dismissive avoidant is not emotionally available. Most people are aware of that. If you haven't any idea what the dismissive avoidant is, go back and look at some of my TikToks. There's lots on there. The dismissive avoidant by nature is emotionally unattuned. They do not have emotional attunement for their partners. They don't hold space for their own feelings. They certainly don't hold space for their partner's feelings. They run from conflict. They run from intimacy. They run from commitment. They would be happiest in a relationship that was very superficial, surface level, where everything was carefree, easy, and they never had to deal with conflict or expectations or had to deal with intertwining with you in the relationship. They minimize their own needs. They tend to be low maintenance, but they really just don't know what their needs are. So therefore they aren't able to express them and actually get them met. And they certainly do not know what to do with your needs inside of a relationship. And they really have a hard time being able to offer transparency and vulnerability. So for them, they definitely are emotionally unavailable. And most people are aware of that with the dismissive avoidant. And in all fairness, it's because they were never modeled emotional attunement. They were never able to hold space to learn to identify and process their emotions. They never had anyone to do that with them. And so in their childhood, they were basically taught they needed to suppress, distract their emotions to deal with them alone as a child because their parents didn't hold space for it. They were criticized, they were ignored, they were made to feel bad whenever they did have emotions that they didn't know what to do with and how to process those. The FA is a little bit more clearly emotionally unavailable. With the FA, they carry that big betrayal wound from childhood. They are always waiting for the other shoe to drop. They are always waiting for someone to harm them. They have learned in childhood that relationships and love are unsafe, that people cannot be trusted, and they cannot be trusted to show up well for them. So they are always waiting for someone to let them down, betray their trust, betray their needs, betray them in some way. So they're always looking for what's coming around the corner. They're extremely hypervigilant about that. They're so busy being hypervigilant, trying to keep themselves safe, that they're really not emotionally available for their partner. In addition to that, they have all these protest behaviors. So instead of coming with emotional availability and being able to hear their partner out or being able to express themselves clearly, they come with these large protest behaviors, right? They go into their fight response a lot of the time. They're not able to pull away the layer of anger, which is the bodyguard usually for hurt and fear and feelings of I'm not worthy or a whole slew of things, right? They get stuck in that anger, and so they're not really emotionally available or emotionally attuned always to themselves. They are very deep feelers. They are very self-reflective, but a lot of times they have a hard time figuring out the root cause of what's really, really behind their anger and their feelings of betrayal, and then how to show up in a way that's emotionally available to their partner. So it's much easier for them to come with sarcasm, with passive-aggressive behaviors, with a full fight response, with attack, with criticism, all sorts of bad behaviors, shutting down, stonewalling, pushing people away, but they aren't necessarily good at direct, clear communication for what's really going on inside them, which is what an emotionally available person would do. In addition, whenever they do start to lean in, that fear of that betrayal starts to kick in and then they pull back. So there's that constant push-pull dynamic, so no one can ever really draw close to them, making them emotionally unavailable. And lastly, we have the anxious preoccupied, which a lot of people think is emotionally available, and they're really not. For the AP, or the anxious preoccupied, this individual is someone who cannot be alone. They really get their self-worth from relationships. They were brought up on intermittent reinforcement. It is extremely important to them that they are not felt to be abandoned. So their big core wound is the abandonment wound. So they will do anything to keep their relationship solid, intact, for fear of being left and the relationship ending. And so that means that they are not authentic to themselves. They do not show up in their true selves for who they really are. They self-abandon easily. They do not ask for their needs to be met. If they ever do have conflict, which they usually will not create, but if a conflict arises, they typically will apologize and they will pull back and fawn or retreat from actually trying to get the problem resolved. Their biggest fear is the abandonment if there's a conflict that does not go their way. They're not so worried about their getting their needs met and the problem being resolved. They're more afraid of the abandonment that could come if the conflict goes sideways and the relationship does not feel like it's on solid ground. So they will be chameleons in relationships, and they will pretty much present themselves the way that they think their partner wants them to be, which is not authentic. It's not emotional availability. So they will keep their desires, their needs, their frustrations, the things that are important to them, to themselves a lot of times, instead of being truly authentic and transparent and vulnerable. It's actually hard for them to be vulnerable because they are afraid if you see something that you don't like, then you will leave them, or eventually they'll be rejected and abandoned. So they very much just sort of put on this mask and this facade, and a lot of times they become people pleasers, but they're really, really trying to be who you want them to be, and they're not being true to themselves. So they're not emotionally available either. So it's really obvious to most people that the dismissive avoidant really struggles with being emotionally available. But the truth is that all three of the insecure attachment styles, all of them struggle with being emotionally available. And that's something that comes as you earn secure attachment.